Okay, well, hello everybody, and welcome to this webinar on the 6 roles of philanthropy in transformational partnerships. My name's Catherine Scott, and I am Director of the Transform programme here at the Partnering Initiative. Transform is our new programme in partnership with Wings and Philea, and it's designed to unlock the power of philanthropy as partners in transformational change. This webinar is our formal launch, so it's a moment of celebration for us, and thank you all for joining us for that. So what do we mean by transformational change? Transformation means moving from a situation that is unsustainable in economic, social, or natural resource terms to a sustainable state that is delivering for people and planet. It creates a self-sustaining state where little or no further intervention is needed. Mindsets have shifted, behaviours have changed. Philanthropy has a crucial role to play in activating transformational partnerships. To do that, the sector must develop a partnering mindset, partnering capabilities, and new ways of working. And that's what the Transform programme is here to support. And you are all part of it. So I'm delighted to welcome this panel that will help us to explore the 6 roles that philanthropy can play in activating transformational partnerships. In a moment, I'm going to hand over to Sameera Mehra, Director of Collective Intelligence and Advocacy at Wings, to give us some opening remarks on the potential of multisectoral partnerships. Then I'll be passing over to Darian Stibbe, the Executive Director of the Partnering Initiative, who will talk us through the 6 roles that philanthropy can play in activating transformational partnerships. Darian is happy to respond to your questions in the chat during his presentation, so please pop your questions in there as they come up. Then we'll be handing over to Hanna Hanses, Policy Manager at Philea, who's going to respond to those 6 roles and give us some thoughts on the wider enabling environment for philanthropy. Then it's back to Darian, who's going to be joined by Thiago Costa, Head of Network at the BMW Foundation. And Thiago's going to give us a first-hand account of how BMW stepped into these roles as they initiated the Collaborative Action Platform. And there's going to be some time for questions at the end. And just time for me to do a quick shout out to James and Lina from the Partnering Initiative, who've helped us to set up and run the webinar. But we've got a lot to get through. So Sameera, it's over to you.
Thanks so much, Catherine, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on which part of the world you're calling in from. I'm Sameera and delighted to be here partnering with TPI, Philea, and of course BMW Foundation joining us to share their insights. For those who may not know, Wings is the global network for philanthropy support and development organizations. We bring together over 250 organizations across 60 countries, and a chunk of our members are networks of networks themselves, which helps expand our reach to close to 100,000 organizations. We define philanthropy as private resources, both financial and non-financial, for public good, which means that the Wings network represents the diversity of philanthropy from individual giving, indigenous philanthropy, community foundations, corporate giving, institutional foundations, multilateral giving, and our diversity is our strength. Now, we all know that we are operating in a moment defined by scale, complexity, and urgency. Challenges are all too familiar: climate change, inequality, economic transformation, AI impacts, declining overseas development aid, rising geopolitical tensions, shrinking civic space, rising cost of capital, experienced very differently in different parts of the world, but they're fundamentally reshaping how we are thinking about development, how development is being delivered and financed. The reality is simple. There is no one organization or sector that can solve these very complex and interconnected challenges alone. And so partnerships for us are no longer nice to have. They are an essential infrastructure for collective and coordinated action. Now, in this changing landscape, we see that philanthropy is being asked to step in by governments, broader civil society, bilaterals, multilaterals, to play a role. And while philanthropy plays a distinct role, we find that sometimes it's underutilized or not as well understood. It can be transactional, whereas in fact, there's a lot of potential in it being strategic. We're also very clear that philanthropy in no way can fill the gaps, but what it can do is bring certain strengths to the table. It can absorb risk and provide catalytic capital. It can fund innovation and experimentation, support research and ideas that others may not fund, connect unlikely actors because of the convening and backing power, and critically bring local knowledge, lived experience, and local decision makers into regional and global decision making platforms. And so philanthropy really has the potential to act as a bridge between the public, private, and civil society sectors. And we see that there is this potential, but it is fragmented, it's siloed, it's under leveraged, and it can take too much time. And so the challenge is, how do we turn this intention, this possibility, into real action? In a needs assessment survey of 55 global foundations by Philea, TPI, and Wings, we found that about 85% see partnerships as an area of investment and development as the way forward. And so, again, many philanthropic organizations recognize this importance of collaboration, but struggle to translate it into something that's structured, sustained, and institutionalized within the organization, but also collectively across the sector. We're seeing different kinds of gaps around understanding clear roles and incentives within the sector, but also across sectors, understanding of motivations and how other sectors operate and function, practical partnership models and co-financing mechanisms that can work and be replicated or scaled out. Institutional capacity on both philanthropy and government side. Just because we say collaboration doesn't mean it's going to happen. It's not a default muscle. It actually needs to be built and strengthened over time. And the conditions or the enabling environment, the regulations that really enable partnerships and deals to happen. So again, while the intent is there, work needs to be done on the system and conditions that enable this collaboration to happen across the diversity of the philanthropic sector. And so this is exactly why we've come together through Transform. As Catherine mentioned, this is the joint initiative between Philea, Wings, and the Partnering Initiative, bringing together our diverse but complementary strengths across philanthropy networks and partnership expertise. And most importantly, it brings us together because we align and share values. And we align on goals. And the goal is, well, how do we make multi-stakeholder partnerships happen at scale, and so that they work at scale and they center people and communities? And like we said, no one sector can do this alone. And so likewise, it's made sense for us to come together to do this together. It is a global initiative to inspire, empower, and accelerate partnerships. And at Wings, this builds upon Principle 4 of the Philanthropy Transformation Initiative, which calls on philanthropy to move beyond working alone and collaborate within the sector, but also across sectors to drive systems change. And it's also aligned with several years of work that we've been doing at Wings around cross-sector dialogues, multi-stakeholder partnership pilots, policy and advocacy, research, capacity building for philanthropy and governments. And we find that all of this is responding to other changes in the external environment. A shift from development to trade and defense agendas, a pressure to unlock and grow the funding pie, unlock new forms of capital, and to really think about whether the systems that we have today are fit for purpose. So Transform is about moving from these isolated efforts to something that's structured, scalable, and has a global approach. And it's not just about better partnerships. It's about shifting the philanthropic ecosystem, our mindsets and our actions. So from being a funder to a strategic partner and an enabler, from isolated projects to coordinated, structured, sector-level collaboration. So it's not just, doesn't die with one person or a group of people. It lives on. From reactive giving to really utilizing the spectrum of all of philanthropic assets, from grant making to assets, endowments, culture, to shape how capital flows and where decisions are made. And so the opportunity for us is very clear. We want to move from intention and talking to really building the structures, the infrastructure, the incentive, the conditions and models that make collaboration work. And so this requires all of us, and this is also an invitation to all of you to join us at Wings Forum in Montreal from the 28th to the 30th of September, where the theme is ACT. And one of the key streams that we'll be focusing on is collaboration and cross-sector collaboration specifically. So really looking forward to this discussion. And Catherine, over to you.
Thanks so much, Sameera. Great work in kind of setting both the context of this conversation and the potential for action that is inherent in it. I'd like to now pass to Darian, who is going to talk us through the 6 roles that philanthropy can play in activating transformational partnerships. Darian.
Thanks so much, Catherine. Thanks so much, Sameera, for really giving a great introduction. For those that don't know the partnering initiative, we've been driving effective collaboration and pioneering and codifying effective collaboration for about 23 years now. And in all of our work with all societal sectors, from the UN to multinational companies, from governments to foundations to international NGOs, there is no question that collaboration and partnership has never been higher up the agenda, but there's also no question that it is difficult to align public and private and people interests, to be able to come together, to find common vision, common goals, to invest the time in building the collaboration, to be able to work across societal differences and differences in organizational cultures and desires. So in the last 3 or 4 years, we have been working very strongly with philanthropy because we have been seeing how philanthropy has an absolute critical role to play here. We know that the transformations we need in societies and economies and the environment require all of the resources from across the sectors. But how do you get them together? How do you get them working effectively? And this is really where philanthropy has an incredible role to play. And I'm going to talk in sort of more details about what those roles are, these 6 roles of philanthropy in driving effective partnerships. But firstly, I want to talk about what are the resources that philanthropy brings. And here we see that there are 4 sort of clear resources that philanthropy and foundations bring to the table. And the first one is really about courage and vision and imagination. So this is being able to envision the future, to sort of have the thought leadership, have boldness to be able to say, look, here's a societal issue. We've got resources and backing. We can try and make a difference. And there's no question that that ability to envision the future and have the courage to try to make change is an essential part of what philanthropy can bring as a resource. The second element, of course, is funding. And we'll talk more about that in a moment, about the different types, both catalytic and sort of programmatic funding. The third one is around the social and political capital that many foundations can have, the networks they have, the trust that they have built, the relationships that can open doors. Also being able to play a neutral role. You're not one of the philanthropy is not necessarily one of the system actors. They're not in the system that needs to be transformed. They can play that sort of neutral, trusted role. And finally, of course, the technical knowledge and capability built up from many, many years of working around the world, being able to bring new ideas, new solutions, build capability in these collaborations and new partnerships. So these are the sort of the 4 resources that are brought to the table. And then the question is, well, what then is the role of philanthropy in making these partnerships happen? And the first one really is around the initiation in the first place. We need to be able to bring together the various different players, the various stakeholders around a particular issue. And philanthropy has this opportunity to be the one to do that, to leverage their political and social capital, to convene people, to be able to embed the idea that change is possible, to be sort of really quite visionary, to really sort of begin to build that conditions for collaboration to be able to happen effectively. And that can happen through sort of informal convening spaces, or it can be sort of much more formal convenings of stakeholders around a particular issue. We're seeing philanthropy with creating labs whose sole purpose is to continuously sort of create these new partnerships, new ideas as well. We're also seeing many foundations creating quite different funding modalities with calls for proposals from partnerships. So this is their way of being able to generate that spark to get partnerships started. That's not enough. And some foundations stop there. And that is not enough to get a partnership going, because you can have all the convening you like, all the brilliant discussions, but then the next question is, what happens on Monday morning after everyone's left the convening in which they have pledged to work together forever? The reality is that unless you then support the next level, the process of partnership development, then these partnerships will not develop. So there's an hugely important role around this neutral facilitation, being able to take this early stage emerging partnership through a systematic co-creation process in which you are really sort of developing the collective vision, you are building the quality of the relationship, you are sort of putting in place the various different building blocks that create this robust, effective partnership. And of course, potentially mobilizing all the various different resources that are required for the partnership then to run. So that's the developing. But of course, collaboration requires continued ongoing support in the sort of the infrastructure of the partnership and the funding of the operations of the partnership. So that's providing things like the secretariat. It's providing the working budget to go and do sort of technical reports on the context. It's around supporting some of the partners, potentially if they're NGOs or communities, then they will need funding to be able to bring their resources and time to the table. Plus, there's all the elements of the learning, the M&E, and the iteration of the partnerships. So partnerships themselves, they need that sort of structure and operations, and that needs to be funded, as well as to ensure that your partnerships are equitable. You are also funding potentially sort of NGOs and communities to be there at the table. So that's the third essential role that foundations can play. And of course, we talked about one of the things that the resources that they bring. Then here we have sort of the technical assistance, and whether that's providing sort of technical advice on a particular issue, or whether that's around even sort of the technical assistance around the collaboration, and that can be either through paying for technical assistance or embedding capacity through secondments or whatever it may be. Very often there's the need for technical assistance in these collaborations. Foundations can provide that. The fifth one then is around seed funding and innovation and piloting new approaches, because foundations are in a position where they can use their funding in whatever ways they want. They have that freedom, and so they can test out concepts, even things that may not work. And if you're in the public sector, you can't do that. You are very rarely do you have any power to test things out that potentially may not work, because basically when you're innovating, when you're trying new approaches, if some of them fail, then honestly you haven't been trying hard enough. If they don't fail, you have to be able to fail. So the philanthropy can provide that support to try things out, and that could be developing it means that many things may fail, but then it's also finding those that don't, and proof of concept of new approaches that can then potentially be fundable commercially. They could be commercially viable and therefore can attract investment. So it's about the generating evidence that then allows others to then come in and invest on these new ideas, new approaches. But sometimes that may not be enough either. So the final element then is around this element of de-risking. And this could be de-risking in the sense of sort of political risk or reputational risk, and having a well-known foundation at the table then basically increases everybody's level of trust. It reduces the reputational risks of those involved because there's a big name behind it. But also there can be something around the financial risk. And so the potential to, in cases where the final output is clear sort of social benefit, then foundations are able to co-fund or match fund or provide financial risk guarantees in some way through some sort of blended finance approach to be able to de-risk. and allow investors to come in and invest in whatever it may be, developing social housing stock or shifting farmer practice to be more regenerative, whatever it may be. But this is a way to reduce that risk and bring in the funding. But also it's around potentially about a more enabling environment as well. So some of these partnerships, some of these programs may require shifts in regulation and policy, for example. And this is something where the influence that foundations can potentially work with government to create that greater enabling environment, reducing regulatory or political uncertainty for investors. So there we have it. Those are the sort of the 6 key roles of philanthropy, and you can see how they sort of fit across a partnership life cycle. You can see the partnership life cycle at the top. This is a very simple version of it, but it's from some initiation through the development of the partnership to implementation, through then the sort of the scaling up or embedding or handing over, the institutionalization of whatever the partnership has achieved in the end. And you can sort of clearly see how each of these different areas, each of the different roles then take a partnership along this partnering life cycle. And you'll also see that this is all catalytic. It's not the foundation that is paying for the huge transformation in energy transition, let's say, from coal to renewable. It is playing this essential catalytic role that opens up the potential for the investment to then, from wherever it may be, which could be public, it could be private investment, to then transform to renewables, for example. But it's not the foundation having to pay the literally billions. They are the ones opening up that opportunity catalytically. Give you one quick example of a partnership which has been supported by Jacobs Foundation. And this is a partnership around a community, cocoa communities in Sierra Leone. And here the challenge is that, in Côte d'Ivoire, apologies, there's a similar one in Sierra Leone. The challenge is that 83% of children unable to read by age 10, lots of child labor in supply chains, children not in school, learning outcomes extremely poor in this region. And there's no question that not only is this a huge social challenge from industry perspective, all the cocoa companies realized we have to do something. There is literally making it illegal for companies to work in this way with this risk of child labor in their supply chain. There's an EU supply chain due diligence laws that turn this into a risk for industry. So industry was there wanting to do something, and they're all trying to do multiple different things. Government's trying to do one thing, individual companies trying to do other things, and nothing really working effectively. And what Jacobs came in, and they said, right, well, first of all, we need to know what's possible, what actually could work. These are serious issues with child education. What are the different ways? What is the underlying issue? What are the different approaches we can take to support children? And so they developed this first phase, TREC, Transforming Education in Cocoa Communities, in which they tried and tested out 12 different educational interventions and to see what would be effective. And actually, out of those 12, only 3 proved to be effective. But they found these 3, and they built an evidence base about what actually is feasible, what could have an impact. And at the same time as doing this, of course, they're building the relationship and the trust with government and with industry. So they're playing this sort of third-party brokering role almost, having one-to-one meetings with industry partners, with government, etc., and then sort of collectively building trust, building the evidence to then move into this next phase of the child learning and education facility, which created this pooled fund, which not only brought industry pooling their funds and being much more coordinated in their investment in education, but brought the government in and required the government to be there, and with the government really leading on what the educational interventions were. And this was the ability to then sort of take it to scale, to the point where through this collaboration, and there's sort of three different levels, three things. One is using this thing called teaching at the right level, evidence-based, that said basically that it doesn't matter what grade a child is supposed to be in, you need to teach them at the grade they're actually at educationally. And so that was a huge shift. But then creating classes for out-of-school children, constructing classrooms, etc., etc. This then delivered change in 4,500 primary schools, significant change. This is having a major impact, bringing together 16 cocoa and chocolate companies, along with foundations, along with the government, having a major impact. It could not happen without Jacobs Foundation's roles. And this is everything from initiating the partnership, supporting the partnership development, the seed funding for testing and innovation, de-risking other investments, providing technical assistance and capacity development. In this particular case, the foundation is providing multiple different aspects to this, multiple roles. In other partnerships, it could just be one or two. But what became clear is that this was hugely valued by the partners. So, Jacobs Foundation gave the first fundamental push to the partnership in a moment in which there was sort of an impasse. It just wasn't happening. You needed the activation energy injected by the foundation to make it happen. They did a pretty amazing job at coming to industry at a time when we were looking for greater collaboration to address some tricky systemic challenges with an amazing solution. And they managed to get the government to invest. That's hugely important. That's to be the social capital to be sufficiently visionary to bring government along. And government is very risk averse. That was hugely important, hugely impressive. And a lot is down to the Jacobs Foundation team and just the quality of the way that they worked and engaged. And on the bottom right one, you'll see that it's Jacobs Foundation provided financial technical support, but operationally, the choices that were made were the choices by the Ministry of National Education. Again, hugely important. It's about the ownership by the government of this overall scheme. So there we go. That is the 6 roles philanthropy can play to catalytically create the transformations that we need in society.
Thank you, Darian. We did get one question in the chat, but we'll come to that at the end when we have some time at the end. If others who are or other participants want to be thinking up their questions, we're going to try and leave a good 10 minutes at the end. But now I'm going to hand over to Hanna Hanses from Philea, who's going to be our first responder to that presentation and give us some thoughts about the enabling environment for philanthropy.
Yes, thank you, Katrin, and also hello from my side. Maybe just a few words on Philea before responding to the very inspirational input from Darian and also inspiring thoughts coming from Sameera and Katrin. So Philea is a diverse and inclusive ecosystem of foundations, philanthropic organizations, and networks, all working for the common good. In our membership, we unite individual philanthropies, but also national level infrastructure organizations, so very much mirroring Wings as our sister organization. We have members in over 30 countries, uniting almost 9,000 public benefit foundations that are all seeking to improve the lives for people and communities in Europe and around the world. We are now in the last stretches before convening over 900 representatives at our annual Philea Forum, which is taking place in 2 weeks' time. So I've been asked to indeed reflect on the 6 roles that Darian has set out. And I must say that the TPI findings are very much aligned with our Philea vision of the unique added value of philanthropy, which is the ability to leverage their reach, their ideas, the independence, and also their resources to effect positive change. The 6 roles that philanthropy plays in partnerships, as outlined by Darian, are seen in our community as tools in the wider toolbox of foundations. What I mean with this is that ultimately philanthropy seeks to support programs in areas from which we all benefit. Think of education, health, science, environment, culture, also international development, as Sameera touched on already. But the key message here is that foundations are really guided by the impact that they wish to achieve, and they will choose the tools and the roles they want to use based on the needs of this impact outcome. as also shown in the Jacobs Foundation case, for instance. Now, Sameera already expanded on the why and the timeliness of partnering across sectors. I would like to highlight a few roles that infrastructure organizations like Philea play in how to make this happen. So more particularly, I'd like to reflect on three different roles for us as infrastructure organizations. First of all, to be a place for reflection on foundations' participation in partnerships. Then secondly, indeed, the place for voicing the needs on the enabling environment for philanthropy. And last but not least, as a place for connecting with others as well. So first of all, Philea has for the past 30 years or more been a place for reflection on partnering between foundations, previously done so under the names of the EFC and Daphne. So I wanted to highlight our thematic networks, which are really a key channel for connecting our members to each other and to relevant actors in other sectors for inspiration, but also joint action. This is where groups of Philea members come together around themes of common interests, and they are currently clustered along our three cross-cutting themes at Philea, which are climate, very much in the spotlight this year, and also democracy and equality. I saw my colleague Ilaria Daria is also joining today. She's leading most of the work in that cluster of work. Then we also have communities of practice, where we seek to enhance the skills and the knowledge within the philanthropy sector in a range of critical areas. We do so by supporting philanthropy organizations in reflecting upon taking these impactful practices, such as partnering, but also keeping them up to date on emerging issues and connecting them with peers around shared learning. All of this is with the aim of making these organizations and the sector more effective, ambitious, accountable, but also inclusive. Then secondly, when it comes to advocacy, we also want foundations to be able to partner with stakeholders from private and public sectors. And for this, philanthropy needs itself an enabling operating environment. Philea has compelled the needs that philanthropy has related to policy in our European Philanthropy Manifesto. The manifesto is being implemented at European and national levels in collaboration with our Legal Affairs Committee, which is composed of Philea members working towards better regulatory environments for philanthropy. We also work together with Wings at the international level as co-chairs and active participants of the Enabling Environment Working Group, headed by Sameera. In our manifesto, I just wanted to highlight the 4 key recommendations towards policymakers, which is to empower philanthropy, facilitate cross-border philanthropy, engage with philanthropy, so thinking of donor dialogues as well, and last but not least, to partner with philanthropy for the public goods, because as I mentioned, an enabling environment will also include good regulation and enabling policy frameworks to engage in public-private philanthropy partnerships. Last but not least, as Philea, we also offer places and tools to connect the philanthropy sector with other sectors and to enable multi-stakeholder engagements. As 3 concrete examples of initiatives, we have our joint initiative with Impact Europe. This is called Beyond Grants, a holistic approach to philanthropy, where through convenings, knowledge sharing, but also policy engagement, we seek to empower foundations to start experimenting with impact investing strategies. This will lead, in our thinking, to a systemic shift in European philanthropy where capital is deployed holistically to address social and environmental challenges. Our Philea Legal Affairs Committee is also working on the next EU budget, the Multi-Annual Financial Framework, where our colleague Federico Malone from the CRT Foundation notes in a recent opinion piece that European philanthropy's annual expenditure amounts to roughly 40% of the EU's annual budget, which is a huge amount if you think about it this way. So alongside of the shift of much of the next EU budget towards national and regional levels where philanthropy is rooted, this offers us ample opportunities for more systematic engagement with policymakers. And then very last but not least, Europhilanthropics is our annual flagship event that brings together representatives from foundations, national associations of foundations, and EU policymakers to discuss a sustainable future for Europe that leaves no one behind. This year, we're also addressing ways to unleash the full potential of philanthropic sector and launch our new comparative research on the legal and fiscal frameworks for foundations across Europe. So as Philea, we're very eager to further build on our experience with promoting cross-sector partnerships, and we look forward to our collaboration with Wings and TPI in our new joint initiative.
Thanks so much, Hannah. Great positioning of the wider ecosystem around philanthropy and all the other actors that are part of that that ecosystem. So I'm going to hand over to Darian and Thiago for the next section of the webinar, and they're going to have a conversation about Thiago's work stepping into these roles during a platform that was created in Brazil. You guys have got about 15 minutes, and I am going to interrupt verbally with 2 minutes to go, and just so that we can make sure we leave time for questions.
Thanks so much, Catherine. Thanks so much, Hannah. Really insightful. Thiago, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's a real pleasure to have you here. I wonder if we could just start, if you just introduce yourself a little bit to the participants here.
Hi, Darian. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me on. Happy Wednesday. It's a pleasure to be here together with TPI, Wings, and Philea at the launch of the Transform initiative. My name is Thiago. I've been working with BMW Foundation Herbert Quandt for 7 years, based in Berlin. For those who don't know, BMW Foundation is a philanthropic organization based in Germany, but works globally with a global network of leaders, but also looking at specific what we call challenges of our time, and our role is to act on them so we can foster a responsible economy and also societal cohesion. So we have 3 main topics. The first one is climate change and energy transition. The second one is urbanization and infrastructure. And the third one is education and qualification. We invite not only our global network to work towards finding solutions to those topics. We find challenges at the intersection of those topics, but also we have our initiatives around them.
Thank you. Yes, and of course, in each of those areas, there's no question that multi-sectoral collaboration is kind of essential for shifting the needle. I'm going to ask you about one particular program or initiative that the foundation has developed, which is the collaborative action platform in Brazil. I wonder if you could just sort of give us tell us a little bit about the collaborative action platform, but particularly about why you started it and what you're hoping to achieve with it.
I think for me to explain what the Collaborative Action Platform Brazil is, I think I did need to I speak a bit more about the background of the foundation with Brazil. Our foundation has been active in the country for over 13 years. So our work started there in 2013. So we count on a vast network represented across regions of the country, but also across sectors. We have a vast number of relationships, but also organizations with which we had partnerships in the past. So the country offered, so to say, a good and conducive environment for us to think of a more active role. So Brazil is a priority country for BMW Foundation. And at the turn of our strategy in 2023, we looked at all the assets, and then we looked at Brazil, and we thought what we could do to address challenges of the country, being in the driving seat for a while. And that's where the Collaborative Action Platform emerged. So we went to the country, we convened leaders, not just from our network, but from wider ecosystem, to understand what we could focus on. Because we understand that we are a philanthropic organization based in Germany, working in Brazil, but we don't come from Brazil as an organization. So we need to understand where we could actually add to the local ecosystem. And that was a time where Brazil was facing major floods, so extreme events. I think most of you probably heard about what happened in the state of Rio Grande do Sul. That's the state at the south of the country, very close to Argentina and Uruguay. So climate extreme events have been part of the reality of Brazilians for a while, and the number of events has doubled in the last 20 years. So 9 out of 10 Brazilians live in cities, and more than half of the population live on the coast. So when we got there, against this background, we understood that the contribution that we could actually make towards the local ecosystem and the current situation in the country was to help foster climate resilience by looking at adaptation initiatives and nature-based solutions, as there was momentum for those topics in the country, especially because there was a mobilization across sectors towards finding solutions to, for example, the flooding in the south of the country. So there was momentum for us to collaborate with other sectors towards this end.
Great. So it sounds like the first role that you were implementing was kind of this initiation. You were doing this convening, and I'm guessing that BMW Foundation. Everyone's heard about BMW. BMWs are cool. I'm assuming that the capital, the social capital, just from the name of your foundation, was helpful in being able to convene all of these different actors.
Yes, I think that's a very important caveat. The BMW Foundation is independent from the BMW Group. Of course, it's a foundation that came out of the group. It's been there for over 50 years, but is independent from the BMW Group. And we understand that the brand opens doors, but that also brings a lot of responsibility. So we are a philanthropy organization working for the public good. And of course, the fact that the foundation has been active in Brazil for over a decade allowed us to not only navigate different sectors, but at the same time to bring experts, leaders, but also people who are facing those challenges firsthand to the table for us to discuss what we could do together. So definitely, the social capital is one of the assets that we bring to the table. And I think that's a very important point, because we are at a turning point when it comes to the project, because we finished the pilot phase now in February and we start a new phase where we would like to escalate it. That's why we're looking for new partners to join us, and it's a very interesting place to be, because we need partners that also not only bring the expertise, the financial resources, but also the intangibles that we bring, which is as we said, the social capital, the events, the facilitation, the technical expertise, and so on and so forth.
So tell us then a little bit more about what it's actually then been doing. So of course there's this initiation part, and then you were then supporting the development of these collaborations. But tell us a little bit about how that worked.
The Collaborative Action Platform is not an accelerated program, it's not an incubation program, but actually offers a collaboration infrastructure for those solutions that are addressing climate risk at the forefront in Brazil. So what we have as the structure of this platform is we selected 3 main solutions from all of Brazil, from Belém, the city where COP took place, all the way to the south, to be at the core of this platform. And we have a portfolio approach where we sit with them on a regular basis to understand how they could collaborate with one another, what are the gaps of scaling, and how we could act on them. But we also look at the system, and for this we have various groups of specialists that are also acting on systemic gaps, because as we address them, we're not only contributing to the wider ecosystem, but the solutions will benefit from it as well. So that's how we work. So in different levels and the platform. And these 3 solutions, I can name them. So one is Observatório das Baixadas. That's a solution out of Belém, as I said, created a platform empowering local communities to not only get data from climate extreme events, but also to provide data to authorities. We have the Nature-Based Solutions Program by the Boticário Foundation, the Corporate Foundation Brazil. Amazing work. They've been working on nature-based solutions for over 35 years. They have an accelerator program for nature-based solutions and so on. And the Regenera Fund in the south that was created to help rebuild the state of Rio Grande do Sul after the floods. So it's a catalytic fund that brings company, philanthropy, government together to collaborate towards investing in some of the local solutions. And we've been working closely with them already for 2 years.
And so you have supported the development of these collaborations, and then are you also providing any sort of financial support or grants to them as well? Is that another role that you're also playing? This kind of this seed funding, if you like?
Yes, partially because BMW Foundation, by definition, is not a grant-giving foundation. So we work based on collaboration according to what we understand is a shared goal for us. Some of those initiatives did receive some support in the base of collaboration for us to address and to drive forward the topic or the objective of the platform. So we had that, but we would say, or I would say here, representing this project, that the fund is not the main, I would say, asset that we bring to the table. Visibility is one of them. For example, so they could actually get partnerships. We brought them to Europe to piece of solutions here. We had a major media partnership to voice and the work and the solution that were developed by them. But the sort of infrastructure for collaboration, the technical assistance that perhaps doesn't come from the foundation. We had a program before in the field of urban development, and so there was some knowledge in there. But the possibility of the foundation mobilizing technical support from the wider ecosystem has been also one of the main assets, I would say, for the initiative, and especially for the solutions there.
Okay, got about 2 minutes left.
That's perfect, because I'm just going to ask Thiago just a sort of final question. Just some of your learnings for what might you do differently if you're doing it again, or maybe put it another way, if other foundations wanted to do similar things, what would be sort of your advice to them?
Be flexible. And I think the report by TPI also says that the PPPs need to be flexible. We went to the country with an assumption, we tested it, then we came back, we recalibrated it. And last year, we also had a moment where I wouldn't say it was a moment of pause at the beginning of the year, but we understood that a platform was becoming too complex and robust and sluggish. And then we don't stop, but we look inside and try to make lean once again, because we should not lose focus of our purpose, I would say, and think about partnerships all the time since the day number one. So what are the language that are you going to use to speak with private sector, with government? There are different jargons. The fact that Brazil has been facing climate risks repeatedly now allows us to kind of navigate that a bit more, I would say, because now adaptation is a language that's speaking with the private sector as well, because they're highly affected by the climate events. So I would say think about partnerships since day one, think about transition since day one, because this day will come, and it's important that you also think about that local governance ownership, because that's important also if you want to have a sustained impact over time. I just want to say that as the final thing, but also mention that if I can, Darian, next week we're going to launch a publication on our website and across our social media with the results of the platform and some of the insights. Please stay tuned because the platform is now almost is 2 years now, and we're happy to share some of the insights. My colleague Paula here is also on the call, my VP, and we are happy to connect, share more learnings, and also collaborate. So that's our main topic.
Thank you so much, Thiago, and I'm really looking forward to reading that report. There's so much experience that you and the foundation have, and it's great to see you drawing out those learnings for others. Thank you very much indeed.
Lovely. Thank you. So we've had a few questions come in through the chat. And I guess they're for all of the panelists, but I think this one might be for you first, Thiago. So we've had Koika from who's head of partnerships at the CSJ Foundation, asking whether we have a view on which of those 6 roles feel most important for a foundation to own itself rather than to outsource in some shape or form.
Thank you for the question. I'm looking at again the 6 steps that we have here. I would say, besides initiation, as we just spoke, I would say the partnerships building, I think it's one of the things that I feel I would say for a while, you're not going to outsource because I think your brand, your reputation would guarantee that a government, the private sector will come aboard. So I would say that that's one of the things that I see foundations playing a role for a while until you have a well-established governance. Secondly, I would say I am a bit torn because operation is something that we've been involved since day one, but now we're letting go. So I would say it was important for us to be there to get things going in the very beginning, but I think it's something that you can let go of. But at the de-risking thing, I think we always need to be there. One of the outcomes of the Brazil Action Platform is that one of these expert groups generated a white paper recommending the creation of a Brazilian definition for nature-based solutions. And this was delivered to the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change last year, just ahead of COP. And now they're working on this, on the national strategy. And those experts are part of this. So there's sort of the risking, supporting, kind of create that conducive environment. I think philanthropy has a role to play from day one all the way to the conclusion of the cycle of the initiative.
Thank you, Thiago. Sameera, I might aim this next one at you. So, in partnerships aimed at this is a question from Mufo in Eurogroup for Animals. So, in partnerships aimed at transformational change, who should have the strongest say in defining success? Should that be funders, implementers, or the communities most affected by the issue? Can you unmute?
I can now. Sorry, I was struggling to find my unmute button. I was looking at that question, and actually, I think one of the things we advocate for as philanthropy stepping into spaces is that when we think about de-risking capital, we think about de-risking in order to bring in different forms of capital, is that the purpose needs to be very clear and centered. For what purpose? And if the goal needs to be to unlock capital for creating change, developmental change, and centering people in communities. So I think that there needs to be the voice of community stakeholders at decision-making tables, but at the same time, the responsibility to deliver on that is shared by different stakeholders, funders, implementers, government, private sector, to deliver different aspects of that. So how do we create decision-making platforms where stakeholders can come together? We recognize that there are power imbalances, even if they are at the same table, and how do you address those? And it needs to start to happen at the ideation phase, then flow into design, then flow into implementation, and then into mapping the impact, and it becomes a flow. So it needs to be at all parts of a collaboration, but we need to be very aware that there will be power imbalances and challenges that we need to address to make sure that those perspectives have the same power of influence.
Thank you. And then on the question from Lorena, which I think is for Hanna, I'm going to aim it at Hanna and Darian. So as we look at deepening partnerships, how do we ensure we're balancing the excitement of new joint pilots with the core glue that organizations need to actually manage these complex collaborations and scale our collective innovation? So I'm thinking about some of the kind of communities of practice and the stories that you've heard of Philea around, partnerships that kind of get started and how to keep that excitement up. And Darian, reflections from some of your experiences. Maybe Hanna, you could go first.
Yes, thank you, Catherine. No, great question indeed. I just wanted to touch briefly on also to add what Sameera was sharing, is that at Philea, we also believe a lot in the approach of trust-based philanthropy and flexible approaches, which really also is a way of sharing the power that foundations oftentimes hold in these relationships and really shifting it also towards the communities and the people and the organizations on the ground. So we're currently as Philea also headed by my colleague Sevda, working on a publication to also untap a bit how foundations are already working with trust-based philanthropy approaches, to also inspire the sector and see if more of this can be unleashed. But that was not the question you directed at me. So indeed, when it comes to this core glue, I quite like this metaphor because I also think of philanthropy infrastructures organizations as glue sometimes in the way that we bring together all these different actors to also make sure that there's peer learning going on, because there's so much knowledge and wealth in foundations. I mean, just listening to Thiago, there's so much that he is also sharing with our communities and our members. And I think it's our role as infrastructure indeed to bring this knowledge to surface and to make sure that this is also being untapped by other organizations. But indeed, we have a lot of interesting things in the pipeline together with TPI. So happy to hand over to Darian to add on that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Hanna. And it's also just building on some of the other things that come up in the chat about the power imbalances. And we're talking about system transformation. System transformation can only happen if it is the system actors themselves, the communities, the companies, the government, etc., who are the ones collectively designing and implementing and owning the system transformation. The role of a foundation, the funder, is to be able to help to make that happen, help them to be able to make it happen. It can never be top down. And actually, one of the roles that we didn't talk about is a foundation can help to minimize the power differentials that you get by playing that sort of neutral party role, neutral party facilitator, so that even where there is this big power dynamic, let's say between government and communities or industry and communities, actually as the third party, they can help to to balance that, to ensure that it is an equitable partnership. And just very briefly on how do you keep level of interest? I mean, there's two levels of interest here. One is from the funders themselves, and there is, meaning one of the criticisms of some parts of philanthropy is about short-termism and wanting to do the next thing, the next exciting thing. And actually, these system change transformation collaborations require long-term support, long-term outlook, long-term funding. So we need to ensure that if where foundations going into this, they're not then going to be stepping away 3 years later. They need to think it's a 5 to 10 year potential process. And then for the collaboration itself, I guess it's two things. First of all, it needs to be important to those involved to want to do it. This is about really changing and improving people's lives, improving the economy, the society, the environment. It needs to be important to them, and the partnership needs to be well managed constantly, through the constant engagement, to ensuring that people feel that they have the equity within the partnership, that they could feel a sense of progress, that there are short-term goals that are being delivered, so that people feel they're on this really impressive and potentially groundbreaking and really life-changing partnership. And that is all about the partnership management, which is why the role about supporting the partnership infrastructure and operations really is so important.
Thank you, Darian. So we're out of time almost, but I just have a few next steps for you all. So thank you for joining us. If you are working at a foundation and you want to dig deeper into any of these topics, this webinar has been a bit of a taster of our masterclass for unlocking the power of partnerships to deliver transformational collaboration, which will be held in Zurich at the start of July in partnership with Wings and Philea. You can always drop us a line to find out more, or you can sign up to our newsletter, which Lina has posted the link in the chat, or you can scan this QR code. We also have a library of public-private philanthropic partnership case studies, which you can visit to find out more. And we're going to be following up this webinar with a kind of one-pager of those 6 roles that philanthropy can play. And we encourage you to use that one-pager and these 6 roles to have a conversation in your organization about which roles you're playing and how you might step into them more intentionally. So thank you very much for joining us. We're very pleased to have launched our Transform program today. So do sign up for our newsletter and follow us, and there'll be much more to come from Transform. So thank you very much, everybody.